turns a war hero into a ruthless mob boss? And what kind of man builds a criminal empire while holding on to family loyalty and tradition? Everybody knows the story of the Godfather, and today I'm going to profile the characters of Vito and Michael Corleone from The Godfather. Are they ruthless killers, or is there something else going on? Let's check out how two very different men lead the same empire and what their choices reveal about power, identity, and generational trauma. Hi, I'm Laura Giles, your host, and this podcast looks at how to take responsibility for your own life so that you are in the driver's seat. It's often easier to see yourself in a mirror rather than look at yourself directly. So if you see anything of yourself or of a loved one in Vito or Michael, I hope that it will inspire compassion and maybe give you some direction for healing. Of course, we have to start with Vito first. And in order to understand someone, you have to know a bit about their history. Everyone has context, and you can only create meaning from that context. So at the beginning of the movie, we see a big Italian wedding where Vito is the grand poobah. And way before that, as a child, he lived in Sicily. Vito's father spoke out against the local mafia's leader's control, or he disrespected his power, basically, in some way. The film isn't really specific about this, but Don Ciccio kills Vito's father to save face and retain his grip on power. Vendetta is an Italian word, and it's part of their local culture. So naturally, Vito's older brother swore revenge. It's his responsibility. And that doesn't work out so well. Don Ciccio goes after him too. So when Vito's mother begs Ciccio to spare her 15-year-old son, he kills her on the spot. Had Vito not been hidden by the villagers and sent to America, he surely would have been killed too. So at 9 years old, Vito endures a transatlantic voyage alone while not speaking any English. So not only is he an orphan, but he has no immediate family. He's taken in by friends of his family in Little Italy in New York. My mom's an immigrant, and I think about her route to America a lot, and I can't even fathom how difficult this must have been for her and for 9-year-old Vito. So Vito gets here. He works a low-wage job and flies under the radar. He gets married, starts a family, and begins helping his neighbors, quietly fixing problems, lending money, and creating alliances with Clemenza and Tessio. And if anyone needs anything, he finds a way to help. All he asks is that they return the favor when the time comes. And that is how he gains their loyalty and love. Now, remember that vendetta thing? Well, Vito was fired from a job once by Don Fanucci to make way for someone else. And Fanucci was the local thug. But slights are never forgotten. That vendetta, remember? So when Vito consolidates his power, he takes Fanucci out. People love Vito, though, because he has a reputation as a man of honor, justice, and discretion. He's not flashy or temperamental. His power comes from respect and obligation. He's selectively generous and makes people feel seen, like they belong. And this is why they call him the Godfather and not the local thug. So it's all about how things feel. Nevertheless, it is a crime family. And Vito knows what violence and destruction is like. His whole family was murdered. He values family above everything because he didn't have one. And he wants to be the Godfather. He enjoys calm and being principled. He respects strategy and diplomacy. His oldest son, Sonny, should be next in line, but Sonny gets whacked. And Fredo is then next in line, but Fredo lacks good judgment and emotional control, and he has no sense of the big picture or strategy. And Fredo doesn't inspire loyalty or respect. He's too impulsive. So Michael it is. Can you already see the intergenerational trauma in his family? Michael's so far removed from all this mafia business. He is a decorated World War II captain, and he's going to law school, I think, when Vito is shot by a rival gang. Sonny takes over as the boss, but that's short-lived. Then there's a second attempt on Vito's life, and Michael thwarts that and then tells his dad he will take his revenge. This is squeaky clean Michael, who has been sheltered from everything. So in that action, Michael's old identity is lost. It's a no turning back now moment where he goes to Sicily to avoid prosecution, falls in love, gets married, and boom, vendetta strikes again. The rival gang in New York locates him and plants a car bomb, but his wife is killed instead of Michael. So let's add up the trauma. He's a war veteran, trauma. There's an attempt on his dad's life, trauma. His brother's killed. Trauma. He kills his father's conspirators. Trauma. And his wife is murdered in a car bomb meant for him. Trauma. So not only did he lose his wife, he feels responsible because he was the intended victim and he lived. Then Michael kills his own brother because Fredo betrays him. And of course, he's under constant threat of betrayal and being murdered himself. So he's like in a stew of trauma. We essentially watch Michael go from a normalish guy to, well, I'm not sure what to call him, but he's definitely not who he was. Any semblance of the original guy is lost under unexpressed grief, terror, and the horror that he delivers upon others. So Michael and Vito are two really different people. Both come from backgrounds of murder, death, and loss. Both have unprecedented grief and are driven by the need for power to feel safe. But Vito has a kind, approachable exterior. He doesn't want to appear hard and ruthless. Michael has resting bitch face, which is a trauma response. He's totally unreasonable and doesn't care if you think he's ruthless. He justifies it and says it's necessary to keep the family safe. He dated Kate before he met his first wife, but when he comes back to her, he doesn't seem to have any love in him. It's like he doesn't dare to love anyone. And both men say they value family first, but Vito uses his power to protect the family and he compartmentalizes what he does for work from his personal life. Michael uses his family to protect and grow his power. To Vito inspires loyalty, while Michael inspires fear and enforces obedience. This is not who he was before the opening scene of the movie at all. He's completely lost himself. And it's like once he crossed the line, he went all the way. So what do you think? Do either of these guys have a mental disorder or are they just bad cats? So narcissism gets a bad rap. Every bad thing is attributed to narcissists. So let's take a look at that. Do either of these guys have narcissistic personality disorder? First criteria is that they have a grandiose sense of self-importance. Well, both of these guys are pretty important. So they're crime bosses, and I don't think that's grandiose. That's a fact. So second is that they are preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success or power. I think the position as mafia boss requires that you think in terms of expanding your power because you have to stay safe. And it's a dog eat dog world. And if you display any signs of weakness, your competitors will take you down. When Vito got big enough, he finally got his revenge on the guy who killed his family. So is that a yes or a no? I'm going to call that a yes for both Michael and Vito. They did pursue that, not out of the need to be bigger than anybody, but to stay alive. So the third symptom is a belief in their own uniqueness. And I don't think Vito thought he was unique. He was quiet, calm, and kept a low profile. And I think he felt that he got where he was because of his cunning, not because he was unique. And Michael didn't really play that game either. The next criteria is a need for excessive admiration. And Vito ruled from a space of love, but it doesn't seem that he manipulated people for that. He gave in calculating ways to increase his power, but it seemed to be motivated by power, not love, to me. What do you think? So Michael didn't do emotions at all. So he wasn't in it for the admiration, but he wouldn't even let his second wife love him. So speaking of which, imagine what a different life Michael would have had if he had been left alone to live a quiet life in Sicily with his wife. Yeah, we'd be having a different story here. So we need 5 out of 9 to get a diagnosis of narcissism, and we're at 0 and 4. So if the next one's a no, narcissism's out. And the next one is a sense of entitlement. And these are crime bosses, so I think that they are entitled to respect and special treatment. So that one's a yes, so we're still in the game. The next criterion is, do they exploit people? Give that another yes. Vito had a soft approach. Michael was hard, but you don't say no to either one of them. So they manipulate to get what they want. Lack of empathy is the next quality. Vito definitely not. People loved him because he looked out for people. And people can use concern and care to manipulate. And I'm not sure that that was part of it for Vito, but I think some of it was genuine. He seemed to truly care for the family, at least. I mean, he lost his birth family. But Michael, no. He had no empathy after Apollonia was killed. So Vito is out as a narcissist. The next criterion is envy. And Michael was not envious of others at all. The final criterion is arrogant behaviors or attitudes, and Michael didn't have that either. So the Corleones are not narcissists. I know we like to paint all bad guys as narcissists, but that's definitely not true in this case. So, what else could be going on here? Well, as far as personality disorders go, cluster A's are characterized by odd behaviors, and Corleones aren't odd. They're pretty mainstream, so we can rule that out. And cluster Bs are characterized by dramatic and overly emotional behaviors. Narcissism is cluster B, so we should probably look and see if there's anything else here that might fit. Cluster Cs are anxious and fearful ones, and that's definitely not Vito, but Michael avoids emotion, so we should look at that. You can't diagnose avoidant personality until adulthood, but it probably sets in childhood, and most people who develop it have this fearful attachment style, meaning you want closeness, but you don't trust people enough to allow yourself to have it. So that's Michael, right? It is, but he didn't have it as a child. So he didn't get that way until he was older. So it's a response to trauma rather than attachment style. Avoidant personality disorder requires that you have at least 4 of the following 7 symptoms. 1, does not engage in occupational activities that would require a good amount of interpersonal contact due to fears or rejection of criticism. That's a no. Michael appears pretty confident and fear does not get in the way of his work. So 2, refuses to engage with others until they feel confident that others will like them. Again, no. Michael does not care if you like him as long as you respect him. 3 is driven by fear or shame or ridicule, which limits their ability to be fully present. Definitely no. 4, cannot relax in social settings for fear of rejection or approval. Nope. Michael gets it done. This is not him at all. 5, feeling of being inadequate or less than others that keeps them from being fully themselves in new social situations. I would say no. 6, possesses of strong negative perception of their social skills, personality, and adequacy. No. Michael proves himself in the war when his father was attacked. So he doesn't have low self-esteem. 7, experiences a fear of embarrassment and humiliation so strong that they're highly reluctant to take risks. Again, no. So while Michael doesn't show emotions, it's not because he's afraid of judgment or ridicule. So we have to go back to cluster B. Is there anything else here that could be going on? And the real obvious one is antisocial personality disorder. Many criminals fit this diagnosis. So let's take a look. So first, the person has to be at least 18. Check. He is an adult. So second, the person's behavior isn't a part of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Check again. Third, the person had conduct disorder before the age of 15. And this is really significant because what this is saying is that even though a person can't be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, as a child, they have to have symptoms from a young age. So what is conduct disorder? It's aggression towards people or animals. It's violating people's rights or property. It's lying, stealing, deceiving, and generally violating rules. So this is criminal behavior. And did Michael and Vito do this at a young age? So no. So neither one of them were ever thugs. So we can rule that out. And the last criterion is that a disregard for the rights of others continues into adulthood. And this is things like impulsivity, irritability, a disregard for safety, irresponsibility, and a lack of remorse for hurtful actions. So people with antisocial personality disorder tend to be cold, intelligent, calculating, and play the long game. All that sounds like Michael. They're calm under pressure and are loyal to their own code, even if it makes no sense to anyone else. That also sounds like Michael. And they can be superficially charming, like Ted Bundy, but they're really emotionally detached. These guys are criminals. They think like criminals. They justify things to continue being criminals, but they don't have enough traits to be antisocial. They do have traits, but the Corleones are not antisocial. But while we're talking about antisocial personality disorder, which we call sociopaths in common lingo, I feel like I have to point out that we tend to paint people with antisocial personality disorder with a black brush. They're criminals. They were criminals as children, and that's all they're ever going to be. And this is totally ignorant of the impact of environment on their development. So people are the way they are because however we choose to present ourselves seems to be the best option available to us at the time. And toddlers don't decide to be aggressive liars because they're born bad or manipulative. It's all they know how to do to get their needs met. And I'm not saying this because I'm a dope who is getting played by these people. I'm saying it because it's the best hope of turning any maladaptive behavior around. You have to take a holistic look at it. Realize that it's not your fault. and applying some compassion to the picture to give people hope. And when people feel safe and learn skills and learn about how to do things differently, change can happen. Michael wasn't born hard, he became hard. He had loads of trauma. There's death all around him, and he coped by shutting down his capacity to love. And we all go into self preservation mode or protection mode when we're under threat. And his beloved father was under threat. His family, his lifestyle, and he himself were under threat. So either these guys have traits of psychological illnesses or they have post traumatic stress disorder. And I'm going with post traumatic stress disorder. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is whether they were exposed to something traumatic, and they definitely were over and over again. Vito starting at 9, and as far as we know, Michael starting with the war, but both had prolonged exposure to death and the threat of death and grief. Did they have issues with hypervigilance and control? Yes. Both of them are always strategizing because they see betrayal everywhere. They see enemies everywhere. They have bodyguards. They both believe in preemptive violence to cut off threats before they arise. And this is why Michael killed his own brother. He couldn't trust him and felt it was a choice of Fredo or him. Do they have avoidance issues? Definitely. Both avoid speaking about their family violence. Michael avoids his own feelings. He shuts out Kay over and over. Are there flashbacks? We don't know about this for either one of them, but could be because of the avoidance. Negative thoughts or feelings is another symptom, and we don't really see this in Vito. He's pretty calm and warm throughout. Michael gets increasingly dark and paranoid. He becomes cynical, emotionally numb, and distrustful. He's always on guard and can't relax. He even gets harsh with his family, and I'd say all those things are negative. Both father and son dissociate. They're completely detached from the violence that they cause, and it doesn't register that they kill people. You could say that this is calculating and evil, or it's possible that this is the only way that they could survive. It's a maladaptive response, to be sure, but it keeps them both from being crushed underneath the weight of all the horror that they have experienced. So violence becomes a functional response to a world that destroyed each of them. It's the only way they know how to keep the family safe. And this reminds me of the Bible quote, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" So I think it's time to reframe things. The mafia, thug life, and gaining power over people isn't sexy. It's not cute. It's dangerous and hurtful. It creates a very disconnection and danger that we seek to avoid. It perpetuates the trauma response that created the behavior in the first place. You just have to look at thousands of years of fighting in the Middle East to know that an eye for eye never ends peacefully. The only way to end this is by total massacre or compassion. I was once in a conflict with someone who was just ruthless. She used her power and position to create as much conflict as she could, and by a miracle, something dropped into my lap which could blow her whole world up. And as tempting as it was for me to use that, I didn't, because although it would hurt her pretty badly, there was going to be collateral damage, and it just probably continue to fight in other hurtful ways. So I stopped giving it my energy. I stopped complaining about her and thinking about it. And I decided that she was only doing what she knew how to do. And I had other options. I wasn't stuck in some trauma bond with her, and I didn't have to participate. So for me, the issue ended. I know it's not that easy when someone is stalking you and there are generations of hate and damage behind you, but it can be done. And when you look at Vito and Michael Corleone through the holistic lens of their suffering, I don't know how anyone could judge them as good as or bad. Life's complicated. And when you factor in their loss, the survivor's guilt, the unexpressed grief, the constant threat, and the sense of responsibility for the family, all that violence becomes understandable. Never justified, but it does make them humans. And once they are humanized again, it's easier to get a place of acceptance and forgiveness. And that's the only thing that can end a vendetta. Otherwise, it can go on as long as it has energy. There were potential turning points here that could have changed everything. Vito could have said, well, of course I got fired to make way for a family friend. I do the same thing, and just went on his way. Instead, he took it personally, and I get it. He's got all this anger that needs a target, but killing Fanucci brought all that Sicily drama back into his life. Michael was out. He wasn't a part of any crime, any of the crime stuff. He was the golden child, and he didn't have to step in when Sonny got killed. Fredo was more than willing to do it, but he felt obligated to avenge and protect his father. I get it. What else could he have done? He had a chance to live peacefully with his new bride, but that option was taken away from him. So for Michael, he had opportunities to turn away, but not really. He did what he did, not because he didn't have morals, but because he did. He had a moral obligation to protect his father, avenge his brother, and protect himself. And it cost him his soul. So healing means giving up whatever you feel you deserve in payment for your pain. Forgiveness means to forego an apology, amends, or reparation. Nothing can ever restore things back to the way that they were. So letting go brings it all back to zero, where things can begin afresh. And withholding love. If you want bad things to end, someone has to be willing to stop participating in withholding love. If you are in a painful situation, what would that be like if that were you? The Godfather still haunts us over 50 years after it was written because it's a human story. It's dialectical. Vito and Michael are noble and ruthless, loving and violent. Most of us didn't see that film for the first time saying, oh, somebody ought to get those criminals off the streets. No, we were rooting for the Corleones because they were fighting for their family. Everybody understands that. We all understand the desire for power because power and wealth bring safety. And everyone has felt threatened by something sometime. And yet the cost of power is very real too. And this is why some of us don't take control. We don't want to risk betrayal, emptiness, loneliness, and spiritual ruin that can come with it. And who hasn't been betrayed or the betrayer? We could judge the Corleones, but we don't because we are them. In many ways, we are them. So I think seeing them in their entirety is a good way to learn about people in general, about them, and about us. Talking about what could someone's diagnosis be feels gossipy, it feels ugly and pathologizing, and I don't like putting people in a box. I don't offer this for that purpose. I'm talking about this to help you see yourself and people around you in a more compassionate way. Hurt people hurt people. If we want the hurt to stop, we have to forgive and restore ourselves back to a place of wellness rather than waiting on someone or something to do that for us. So what do you think of The Godfather? What did I miss? Did you see something else? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for tuning in. Ciao.